Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to the third webinar session in the topic of Hard Talk 2, the good, the bad, the ugly, ethical business conduct violation in Fintech. The session will be moderated by the partner Ginting and Rekso Diputro, Ellen and Ovry LLP, Bapak Sugianto Osman. Please welcome Bapak Sugianto Osman.
Terima kasih moderator. Selamat siang Bapak dan Ibu. Untuk session berikutnya ini kita akan segera mulai dan saya akan mulai dengan memperkenalkan panelis. Seperti yang diminta oleh SupTech sebagai penyelenggara Fintech Summit ini, khusus session ini kita akan selenggarakan dalam bahasa Inggris. Jadi mungkin saya undang satu demi satu panelis yang akan bergabung di dalam diskusi kali ini. Now, to start with, we have been given a fulsome topic that we need to cover in this discussion. The good, the bad, the ugly, ethical business conduct violations in Fintech. So I'm going to briefly introduce the four amazing speakers that we have with us in this session. Kaspar Situmorang. He's the EVP Digital Banking Development and Operation of BRI. So we're expecting to hear from Kaspar the perspective of a bank with respect to Fintech, obviously.
Happy to be here.
Then we have Sunu Widiatmoko, the co-founder and CEO of Dompet Kilat, and he's also the Secretary General of AFPI. Obviously, Sunu will be covering the perspective of P2P platform, as well as from AFPI perspective. And then we have Vincent Iswara, CEO and founder of Dana, e-money issuer, obviously. And last but not least, JP Ellis. He is a CEO of C88 Financial Technologies that owns checkaja.com and CheckScore. And he's also a co-founder of AFTech. And so JP will be sharing the perspective of financial marketplace, credit scoring, as well as AFTech. So we have been given 45 minutes to cover this topic, and let's try to make the most out of the time given. Now, here we are in 2020, a very different year from where we were last year. And I just checked the last Fintech Summit was held in person, obviously. It was held in JCC in September 2019. Now here we are in 2020, a very different year. I want to start that by asking each of you to give the audience a sense of what has happened in the past 12 months in your respective space in terms of the growth, the problem that you're facing, before we actually jump into discussing the unethical behavior issues. Please, maybe I start with Vince.
Hi, Sugi. Thank you, and good to see all of you guys. I see a lot of friendly faces, so it's really good to be sharing this panel with all of you. I think this is a great event and really good education, not only for the market, but also for us. And in the last 12 months, I mean, we've seen that we've done a lot of, not a lot, one big changes, right? We had this pandemic issues, which is forcing all of us to rethink how we approach the market. And one thing that is really happening very fast is the digitalization of the market, right? I mean, suddenly when everyone's just staying at home, everyone's really have no options rather than to try to start to move digitally. And then some people are able to migrate successfully. Some are still in progressing. Some are still confused. But overall, we've seen it that a lot more people are really on board to this digitalization era. And we've seen in our cases that our users are still growing in this time because more and more people are moving to the digital. So the digital payment ecosystem started to be pretty important for them to do businesses and also to do transactions. And we've seen more and more of the smaller and medium enterprises, especially the micro businesses, are getting digital as well. We've seen a big pickup in that segments as well. So overall, it's encouraging where we're going. So we hope that the pandemic is going to be over soon. But by then, a lot more people are more educated about the benefit of this digitalization. So we have a high hope that the market trend is still going to keep growing.
Thanks, Fizz. Can I get Kaspar to also talk about this briefly, please?
Of course, Sugi. Thank you so much. Distinguished speakers, Vincent, JP, Sugi, Sunu, happy to be here. From perspective of bank, I think this is in a challenging years with COVID-19 pandemic, which caused global economic recessions and many people lost their incomes and jobs. Well, it's not surprising, I think, especially the bankings having tough times. But however, if we check on quarter 3 last quarter, where the market growth on lending business was only 0.5-ish%, and Bank Rakyat Indonesia are able to score 5-point-something%. I think we are glad. I think so. The concepts right now is business follows stimulus. I think so. We were given tasks as well from the governments to accelerate this micro and ultra micro business nationwide. So we can still see the challenge, but however, we have to accelerate at the same time, Sugi. So we're lucky to be able to see the growth in these sectors, but we are also still far away from last year profit, I think. So this is still our challenge to get back to the right tracks and onboard the right customers as well along the way until 2021. Hopefully, all of the stimulus and all of the businesses will put in place, and we can see the better growth, I think, in the next 6 months. Back to you, Sugi.
Thanks, Kaspar. Now, turning to Sunu, can you talk about P2P?
All right, thank you, Pak Sugi. Yes, this pandemic really created problem for everyone, I guess, all the financial sectors. So when it happened, initially, we all focused in the first quarter of the year, when the pandemic hit, most of us very busy with the restructuring. So the lending of the industry dropped as small as 30% or 40% from the initial before the pandemic. So it was really everyone trying to do their best to survive, to stay afloat. But thankfully, this September alone, we already back from month-to-month disbursement. We already back to the pre-pandemic era. So now in September figures, the industry disbursements about 8 trillion. It's the same number with the disbursement in January. So pretty much in terms of the numbers, we already we covered. Of course, in the percentage, we still lower compared to the month-to-month growth in the September, in January. But we are optimistic that we are now back on track. If you ask me why we already back on track pretty fast, I think the number of reasons, because we've done a lot of homework in trying to align the industry. We do a lot education, socialization, and because of it, now people are more aware and they could distinguish which are the legal peer-to-peer and which are not. So the trust is there, and now the market could use the lending from the fintech industry properly, not to trying to abuse the lending from the online lending. So those, I think, create a good basis of why the recovery is quite fast. And more importantly, that as always, the machine learning is there. So the machine of our platforms could identify which are good, which are not. So now we are at least now we started off from a good customer base. That's what we see now. So we are quite optimistic seeing the future of peer-to-peer lending back on track again. Back to you again.
Thanks, Sunu. And last but not least, again, JP, can I get you to also comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much, Sugi, Vince, Sunu, and Casper. It's great to be on the panel with you guys. Yeah, I think my other colleagues here have covered it. You know, obviously, second quarter was pretty bleak in the marketplaces and credit scoring businesses. As Sunu implied, there was a lot of, you know, restructuring, kind of contract renegotiation going on. But broadly, from the beginning of the third quarter onwards, we've seen a really strong market recovery. Obviously, we're serving financial institutions, big banks, all the way down to kind of more emerging categories. We're seeing definitely flights to quality over quantity. So risk policies are definitely significantly tighter than before. But we're also seeing incredible tailwinds towards digitization. Kind of the way we like to think about it is, you know, throughout the course of 10 weeks, we probably accomplished, you know, 10 quarters of industry evolution. We've seen a lot of big banks release some really amazing developer sandbox tools, including Casper's Bank, which is going to kind of, continue driving the sector. And from an AFTech perspective, we've seen quite a lot of development in codes of conduct, in kind of the community and the business community coming together to really say, how can we help create a clear, transparent, digital, and consumer-friendly sector going forward. So particularly with the news of some of the vaccine trials, we're quite confident that 2021 will be a year where, you know, digitization is really fully unleashed. So it was a bit trial by fire, but definitely third quarter going forward, we're definitely more positive.
Thanks, JP. I think that what I've been hearing from each one of you is optimism, right? And with the news about the vaccine and with the new president-elect in the USA, that seems to be bringing optimism to the market, as we can see from the IDX, from the rupiah exchange rate. Now, let's dive into the very topic that we are asked to cover on the unethical business practices. And I will again turn to Vince to get you to talk about, from e-money perspective, what are the unethical business practices that you see arising, continue, even growing in the past year?
I think this is an issue that is concerning not just because of the COVID pandemic, but an overall in digitization era. The most important is to understand about the concept of growth at all cost, right? I think it's a bit concerning that the growth at all cost is really should be, let's just say, should be, you know, we have to see it to make sure that it's being done in an ethical way. And some of the concern that has been rising is one, it's about data sharing policy. I think that's a bit of a concerning now, is because more and more of you know, everyone in the company, all the startups, all the fintechs, all the incumbents, everyone is starting to realize that the importance of data, right? So the key here is not only to understand the importance of data and how to protect it, and also basically also how to make sure that we can share the data in the right way. Because for consumers, right, I think they really have little understanding of what kind of data that belongs to them and what kind of data that they're willingly share. In a lot of cases, when we have an agreement between two companies, fintech companies, or with the merchants, sometimes we have to be able to share some data because of the ease of use, because of the onboarding process, because of making sure that the experience is actually really good, so that the users can be onboarded quickly. But then we forgot to actually make sure to the users what kind of data that actually exactly what kind of data that you are shared. Where are your data now located? Who has your data? Those sort of things. I think this is very important for all of us to understand and to make sure that we can able to protect them. So it's not only just thinking about growing, making more use cases, making more ease of use available to all sort of activities, financial inclusion and services, but also how to make sure we can the users understand that their data is being protected, their data is actually secured and not just shared excessively. Second thing is, I think it's also about, the rise of machine learning, right? There is a lot of progress in that segment and area where we are starting to use artificial intelligence to make decisions on the behalf of a manual process. And then that decision is making to judge whether or not certain individuals, certain peoples is available to certain financial services. So the concerning part is that machine learning tend to have bias. And the reason being because everything that is done is essentially at the beginning, before they can learn something, it needs to have someone to actually judge whether or not the answer is yes or no, whether or not this is good or bad, right? So if not managed correctly, you will have a bias that tends to be out of the norm or basically a bias that might not be ethical. So this is also very important, and that's actually been discussed globally as well about having a ethical committee in the machine learning engineering development platform. So then all the bias is actually going to be able to be managed properly before they're being deployed, and then suddenly in the market, that's the bias. It's basically choosing the certain segments of people or certain segments of categories compared to the others. So that's the kind of thing that we have to be aware in order for us to really move going forward to have a healthy and really sustainable growth. Is just to make sure that when we want to grow fast, we should really take a look into consideration of what kind of ethical responsibility that we need to make sure in order for us to protect our customers and to make sure that we are doing the right way for growing forward. Okay, that's my take.
Thanks, Vince. Now, similar question for Sunu. Can you walk us through what again, from an unethical behavior perspective, is there a growing trend? Are we containing it better for the past 12 months?
Okay, thank you, Sugi. Well, I think it is also aligned with the pandemic, right? The business is declining. So, but I think most of it is because the unethical business conducts has been declining very drastically. I think it's because that AFP, the association, also the OJK have done quite aggressive socialization and education to the users, so they would not get trapped into this illegal fintech. And we also enforce from the AFP members that they should they must comply with the code of conduct that we put forward. So because the punishment is really clear, the ethical committee could, the ultimate decision, they could be expelled from the AFP membership. So our members tend to comply with all the code of conduct. So that's why most of the complaint that we've seen, yes, it dropped significantly compared to the pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic is about more than 1,000 complaints per month. Now it dropped to less than 100, and 80% of it still related to the illegal fintech lending. So only 20% is on the based on our members. So, but still, when we confirm, most of the complaints are baseless. It's not strong. So very little cases that goes to, if not none, to the ethical committee at this point in time. So from our perspective, we've seen that the ethical business conduct violation is, I would say, very minimal to our members. Peer-to-peer lending under the AFP contain about 155 AFP members. But we have to admit that most of the unethical business conduct are done by the illegals. So I think this is really the issue because it's beyond us, it's beyond AFP, beyond OJK. What we could only do is just educate and do the socialization to all the users, customers, not only in Java, but also outside Java, not to use the illegals. That's the best we can do. And but I think it's also fair to see what kind of violation in the ethical business conduct for us here to understand. Well, first of all, it's of course the unauthorized data access, but OJK, AFP also always scrutinize our members on the Google, what kind of data that they access. If they ask for data context, certainly that would violate the OJK regulations. So it would not happen to our members because they know the consequences. Also, the abuse of data. Again, this is also done mostly by the illegal. They share data for the marketing purposes. So they get all the data that they take from the mobile, and they do it for the marketing purposes. And also share with other illegals, of course. Unethical collection practices is also unethical business conduct, but this has been very minimum for the AFI members. They know the consequences. But yes, some of the illegals still doing this, although now they're quite afraid because the cybercrime police is very active trying to catch this. But also one of the other cases is on the unethical is of course the predatory lending or the high interest. And this is something that we need to look at seriously because of course usually when business is not good, the growth is not there, the risk is high. I've seen by the growing NPL, and some of the platform might tend to increase their interest, which is that would violate our regulation because we limit the association, the AFP, we limit the daily interest rate, not only interest rate, all cost lending is limited to 0.8%. So we always watch whether during these tough times our members violate these limits. I think that's pretty much what kind of ethical business violation that's happened in the peer-to-peer lending or fintech lending spaces. Back to you, Sugi.
Thanks, Suno. Obviously, that's a concern for everyone because that's a cancer that is killing the industry itself. It is not taken care of. Now, in connection with that, I'm going to turn to JP, and given the limited time that we have, I'm going to combine two questions into one. And the question is, what can we do, the industry do, to help in preventing such practices? And also, what are the supporting factors needed by the industry to enhance risk prevention and mitigation? So you mentioned earlier about code of conduct, industry standard. So please, JP.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I'll go through that somewhat at speed. But before, I'd just like to also kind of frame, I think from many of our perspectives, particularly in the marketplaces and credit scoring clusters in AFTech, I think when we think about some of the unethical practices, largely the way we think about it is framed around three clusters of activities. The first one is the very dangerous and destructive illegal lending practices that my colleague Suno just touched on. Really have to commend the entire team at Satgas Waspada OJK. I mean, they are doing a fantastic job rooting out illegal players and shutting them down. If my numbers are correct, per September, they've shut down, just in September alone, 126 illegal lenders, 50 illegal pawn shops, and I believe 32 illegal investment firms. So kind of illegal activity needs to be stomped out. And as you said, Sugi, quite correctly, it is a cancer that is eating away at the industry and also at our hardworking communities here in Indonesia. The second one is also data. So I think Vince touched on this as well, but obviously kind of data, who has it, who does it belong to, you know, and what are our regulations to protect that and ensure high degrees of consumer protection. This is absolutely paramount. I think there's traditionally, and Vince touched upon this, so I won't go deep into it, but you know, the data actually belongs to the consumer. It doesn't belong to the platform. Lots of platforms go out and say, here's all this data and here's what we're going to do with it. And that's fine as long as it creates value for the consumer. And I think the previous panelist sessions touched upon this in terms of where's the data and how can it be integrated so that the NIC is at the center of everything. And, you know, doing that well creates a fair, just, and equitable society. So data protection is paramount. But really, we believe one of the most important ones is just consumer literacy and consumer knowledge, right? If you think about budaya kita ya di tanah air ini, apa namanya, kita kan kayak budaya wanipiro. Masa sih kita ke pasar mau beli cabai, tidak tahu harga pasaran cabai, ditipu beli cabai, nggak mungkin gitu kan. Semua ibu-ibu dari Sabang sampai Merauke tahu harga pasaran cabai berapa gitu. But because we have low standards of literacy among the financial kind of verticals, obviously consumers don't have the awareness yet. So I think it's really important that all practitioners in the financial services and technology industries really devote resources to educate consumers, right? I don't think it's an intelligence or a smarts thing. It's just basically a knowledge gap. Transitioning to the second part of your question there, obviously, you know, in an open internet architecture, anybody can put something up on a Google Play Store. So it's really kind of difficult to kind of control all verticals, as Sunu said, control all variables. But what we can do as an industry is have very strong codes of conduct, very strong ethical standards, and very clear methods for enforcement. So within the AFTech kind of working groups, we have several working groups that correspond to different fintech activities. We are actually very close to finalizing a very detailed and comprehensive code of conducts that cover everything from data protection to ethical violations, sanctions, and even, as Sunu implied, also from AFP in extreme cases, potentially an expulsion. And the ones that are very close to being launched are in marketplace aggregators, innovation credit scoring, and personal financial planning. And our expectation at AFTech is all of the other working groups will follow suit with very clear codes of conduct very soon. So that's what we have been doing, and we expect this activity to continue gather pace. And hopefully by you know, in the next several quarters' time, there won't be any companies supervised by AFTech who are not code of conduct signatories.
Thanks, JP. Now I want to turn to Caspar, and this is something that was also mentioned in the previous session about how bank may have been seeing, probably not so now, but for you to comment on fintech as a threat to the banking business. So I would like to get Caspar to comment on that, because you are with BRI and also you are with Link Aja, right? And beyond that, also what sort of collaboration between banking and fintech industry can do to mitigate risk arising from unethical business conduct, please?
Right. I think this is a very good question. I think we've never seen, particularly in Bang Rakyat Indonesia, we've never seen fintech as a threat, though. We've always seen that the fintech is our biggest partners, I think, in accelerating financial inclusions and economic inclusions in Indonesia, Sugi. So I think at the speed at which digital services are evolving today is remarkable, but it has its downside in the other side. You know, banks must be vigilant about protecting their assets, but face an uphill battle as the what to protect and who to protect it are constantly rapidly changing, I think, these days. But unfortunately, I think fintechs often possesses the right mix of agility and scalability to adapt and respond to these changes quickly. Thus, their bank partners can benefit too at the same time. So we've offered a four-pronged solutions, I think, to these collaborations to make a most out of it. The first one is both sides must improve and collaborate, I think, in some sort of early warning systems to predict any anomaly that will happen to the customers, and each customers they already been given the facility of lending or payment or investments and such. And the second part is the whistleblower systems, I think. So both sides must be able to access these whistleblower systems to anybody who are involved in the collaborations between these two institutions, I think. So anybody can report and check their integrity on each of the partnerships. The fourth one, I think, is to improve the fraud detection systems on both sides, I think. So these fraud detection systems must be able to detect in real times and especially follow-up actions precisely on each and every fraud, specifically on lending, payment, or in investments. Least but not least, I think, in order to be able to mitigate the risk that came from violation of ethical business conducts, we need to share some sort of a blacklist together, I think. So once we've already had this blacklist shared together, so it must be able to reduce down some of the potentials in the futures of wrongdoings or unethical business conducts, I think, on both sides of the coins, I think. So back to our first point, we've always make sure that our counterpart in the fintechs are always able to grow together with us. And that's why in bankings right now, all of the digital transformations are pushed very hard in order to be able to keep on the same scalability and the same agility. So there will be no more bank unable to keep up with the fintechs. And in the end, they think the fintech as a threat. However, it's not a threat. It's the partners in order to be able to accelerate Indonesia's inclusions in financials and economic inclusions, I think. But however, I think one thing to make sure that the unethical business conduct was for public to have trust in the financial systems. I think the regulatory frameworks must be enforced by the effective regulators as well. So this requires a heavy, what we call collaborations, I think, among institutions, governments, fintechs, and the banks in order to be able to, bring more value, I think, to the customers and reduce down the potential fraud. Especially during pandemic, we've seen a lot of criminals using sophisticated methods to callously exploit people's financial concerns to trick them into giving away their money or information. And from our report shows that fraud cases in financial transactions involving some of our fellow banks increased by 30% domestically during this COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia, Suki. So we've heard, I think in news, we can see is that we've heard some of the scams and frauds during these pandemics done by some of the, non-responsible bank employees as well as external parties working together. So we're urging everyone, especially in the participants of this web seminar, to only trusted sources and be on the lookout for signs on potential scams, I think. All in all, we've seen a better growth, I think, if we do this together, if we do this collaboratively, I think. Back to you, Suki.
Thank you. Now, obviously, we are not alone in this, right? I mean, surely we can learn from other countries who may be more advanced in terms of the growth of the fintech. Now, I would like to get Fins to touch on that point. What can we learn?
Vince, I think you're still on mute.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, we lost your point.
Okay, so do you mean in this ethical topic or in overall topic?
More specifically in the unethical behavior topic.
Okay, so this is basically what we can learn from a lot of things that has been going in the fintech world globally, right? And the thing is, I do think Indonesia, it's not far behind. As a matter of fact, we're the fourth largest in terms of penetration of digitalization for e-payment in Asia. But of course, definitely we can learn from other markets about the unethical practices done by the other fintechs or ex-fintech players. So one thing is just it's a matter of making sure, once again, right? It's that we as a fintech players, as a startup, we need to be able to very much employ this ethical standard in each of our company, and that's very important. And that's why ethical committee, that's why a code of conducts, that's why all of those sort need to be put in place strongly. And we've seen, for example, like there's some cases in US where sorry, I will not say countries, in other areas of the world that, for example, that employee is leaking the customer's data, and that causes a very big issue for his customers scoring data leakage, and that's caused issue to a lot of financial institutions. And that has to do is, once again, right, if we want to make sure that we can protect our customers' data, we have to also make sure that our internal team itself is very protective of them. For example, like in our case, in Dana, we don't even allow our developers to have access to our customers' data. We have a very strict data sharing policies to anyone, even internally. And we've seen that in some other part of the world area as well. And this data sharing, data leakage possibilities is actually causing a major a business. For example, like people are tracking someone's movement and giving them a lot of advertisings, giving a lot of unnecessary intrusions into daily life, and that's causing a lot of issues for the consumer itself, right? So we've seen that happening in other part of the world, and then that's the thing that we need to learn from ourselves and then to understand. And that's, once again, right, like what JP was saying, I think the understanding of the customers or education to the customers is really, really important, because we have to let them know what is it, the data that we're getting from them, what is it that are we sharing it to anybody else? If we do, that doesn't belong to the platform itself. It actually, the data does not belong to us, but it actually belongs to them. So they need to have a consent for it, and they need to know that consent is very clear and stated, and what is it for. And that's kind of the most important things that we need to do to be able to grow in a healthier way. And then some of the things that we've been looking at is also that we try to want to affect people on doing certain things by giving them a lot of incentive and motivation. So, and then that happens also in a lot of another part of the world where growing is the most important things in their mind. So one of the things that we need to make sure is also to educate the market that, when you want to grow and you give marketing, discount, sales, promotions, and I think it's really important to see that the users need to be aware that eventually it might not, be sustainable to do all the time. So you need to do it in a way that it's help to educate the customers for them to do certain actions, or to make sure that they know that this is helping them to understand certain features or making them to try it. But at the same time, we cannot give them a prolonged, continuous, kind of like incentive program, so that the users feel that this is also now become part of their daily activities. And it's making them feel that there is nothing, basically making them feel that there's nothing wrong with this. And that will make it very difficult later on when the incentive or the marketing on the discount started to disappear. And I think that's why I want to raise this, is to understand, right? In other part of the market in the world, there are certain companies that already started doing this excessively, and once it's over, the users started to drop, the users started to disappear. And we need to be aware that we need to do it in a healthier way so that the users is actually are engaging in our platform because of value propositions that we give to them. And why I want to raise this in an ethical discussion is that we need to be able to be responsible on how we educate the customers in the right way. We cannot educate them in the wrong way so that they will feel that this is part of a daily, or this is part of the offering of the value propositions, instead of this is just how to educate the market in the right way. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Vince. This will be last question before we wrap this session up. I'd like to get Sunu to please talk about the supporting factors from regulator, government, and industry needed by the fintech industry. Again, same topic, to risk prevention and mitigation. Can you briefly touch on that, please?
All right, thank you, Suki. Certainly, this is I mentioned this at the last Indonesia Fintech Summit last year. Is about the data privacy protection law, which we are waited been so long. We hope it should be passed by the Parliament very soon, because that would be the key of all what we discuss. We need to maintain and bring trust at the highest level, especially for the fintech. We cannot forget that fintech still financial services, and financial services trust is very, very important. That's why we AFP OJK were fighting very, very hard against this illegal, because we don't want them as a cancer to destroy what we've been trying to build very hard. So law is very important. Second, I think most importantly also, this is already mentioned by one of the speakers from the bank, that I think interconnection for data sharing among industry player as well as the government agency, I think is paramount. The reason being is that fintech is the entry level for those, the underserved and the underbanked, to get into the financial literacy and financial inclusion. So we would be the one who know what is the rating, what is the behavior of this person. So we know the credibility, bankability of this person. So I think we have very valuable information and data in our industry, which is managed by the Fintech Data Center. Of course, it's still a baby, it's still initial stage, but what we are foresee in the future is that those bad people who's trying to deceive, take away money from our lender should not do the same to the banking system and to other financial services systems. So I think people should not hide under the sun. So this could only be done if all the information scattered be intact, interconnected. We could share the information, of course, without violation the data protection, but we should know more on people, what their track record in other industry. I think this would be valuable. So we would not waste resources. Each industry, be it banking, multi-finance, or the fintech, they should not waste resources, waste money in a form of NPL, taken away by all this fraudster. So that is very important. Last but not least, I think I would also touch base not only for the fintech, but also the digital platform, the digital application in general. I think there should be more regulations requiring those who are accessing data to comply with the international standard procedures like ISO, because we've heard many, even though this is not in the fintech, we don't want to hear that. In other platforms, we've seen there's data leakage. It's not something that is pleasant to hear. It has to be stopped, and we want to make sure that it could not only happen to the big platform, but it should be avoided only for a small platform who access data from the public. So I think the reason being this is because of trust. We are all in the financial services related businesses, which is trust is very paramount. So I think those are the very key things that need to be brought up, need to be resolved. I hope, I don't want to talk about this this particular issue in the next summit next year. So it has to be resolved within this year, because this is very important to revive the economy also during the pandemic. Back to you, Sugi. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. And so allow me to sum up what the discussion that we have been having in the past one hour or so. And I've learned a lot hearing from the four of you here. I think fintech is a relatively young industry in the sense that how long have you been doing this thing, right? 5 years, maybe? Yeah. But then it's great potential, and that's where the future lies. Everybody's going to fintech for that reason. Now, but then, of course, there are challenges and actually threat to the fintech industry itself. We mentioned about cancer, the unethical behavior by the players themselves, right? Obviously driven by short-term gain, and that's what needs to be dealt with, right? And that's again, anybody who is really in this industry for the long term, they will think twice, 3 times. And before making anything that will hurt the industry in the long run, and so that any unethical behavior needs to be stamped out. You mentioned about private data protection. Yes, that's clearly at the core of the industry, and that hopefully will be out soon, and then will give a sufficient level of clarity and also protection for people and for the industry, for the users. And lastly, obviously, balance and check. And this is where the regulator and the associations, right, need to collaborate one another in order to further accelerate the growth of the fintech industry. So with that, I on behalf of AFTEC, I'll thank each one of you, the speaker, for taking the time for this session with in this Indonesian Fintech Summit 2020. Thank you very much. And I turn this back to the moderator.
Thank you, Sugi.
Thank you to the moderator, Bapak Sugianto Osman, and all speakers for a very exciting and comprehensive discussion about ethical business conduct violation in fintech. Thank you so much for your insights and recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of first session of this event. Before we join to the breakout room, please let me remind you that we still have our second webinar session in the 4 classroom with 8 topics at 13 p.m. Jakarta. Please join the meeting link by register at www.fintechsummit.co.id. We sincerely thank you for attending and for the kind support. See you again.